Hello everyone, welcome to another segment of Abalandeli Belanga. It's your host here, Umlandeli Welanga. We're wearing the fez today, and look where it's pointing. It is pointing east. It is pointing to the right. It is pointing to the right. The right hand of the Father. Happy New Year, Happy New Year. Yesterday marked the start of the civil work year in South Africa. That's where we are, the civil work here, not the spiritual. I understand many of us as Black South Africans are now starting to understand that the start of the year, the spiritual start of the year is in September. But the civil year begins on the 2nd of July. I'm going to get into this. You can also check out the video I did before this where I'm actually explaining this. So we are in the season of the goat. We are in the season of Dennis Imbuzi, Azazela. So yeah, we're going to be talking about the goat. I'm going to break down some words as usual. We're going to get into etymology. We're going to get into solar biology. We're going to get into what this means for us in the body. I'm also going to get a bit geeky. I'm going to geek out. We're going to get into science because, like I keep saying, just to maybe backtrack a bit as to if you are wondering, what is the point of all these lessons? What is the point of this? The point is to actually show umntomnyama that spirituality and religion, modernity and science comes from the root astrology. All these systems, they can be traced back to the symbols and asterisms our ancestors placed in the sky. We can trace the alphabet as well to these asterisms. We can trace the numbering systems, but not just the stars. Actually, to be more correct, we are tracing them to the positions of the sun. Hence, I call this movement Abalandeli Belanga because we are following the sun. I understand now we've come acquainted with this saying, know thyself, and thou shalt know the universe and God. But many of us now are still stuck at that rhetoric where we think knowing ourselves means knowing the 4 lineages of our ancestors, understanding our totems, nezibongo, and just getting our ancestors, I'm proud of my ancestors, and we just work ourselves into a frenzy. But there's more to it than that. The more to it now is where you are studying self, not inyama, but you are studying the makeup of self, how self is put together. And where do we get this lesson? As above, so below, as within, so without. This lesson, we get it from the sun. If you want to understand the orbits of atoms, you look at the sun, study the sun and the 7 spheres, how they move, the interactions, the reactions, the electrical and magnetic reactions that take place there. This is what I am trying to syncretize and bring together to our people. We are way past that stage now where we should still be fighting over spiritualists or Josists fighting over religionists, whether it's Muslims or it's Christian or whatever denomination or sect you are coming from. We don't need to fight about this because these come from the same place. If you know how to read and study these systems, you will realize that they represent, or they are talking about, into a one. Further to add to this is the realization that these writings actually come from the understanding of our animist ancestors, who at some stage took this information now and inculcated it into star lore, mythology, folklore, oral tradition. For a long way, that is how man passed down information and taught himself through these traditions. We don't have to fight that. We don't have to argue. Hey, listen, we've argued, we've fought enough that, hey, the Bible did this and that to us. Hey, the Quran is doing this and that to us. And hey, and then now there's this whole new cluster of black people now who are just technophobes. They literally wish we could go back to running around in the bush, ngamajistring in animal skins. They are anti-technology. You will hear them say, we don't need technology, we need to simplify life. And then you'll find the very same people marveling at the pyramids. Wow, the pyramids, we built the pyramids. Yet you're a technophobe. How are you a technophobe and marveling at pyramids when the pyramids were produced by technology of that time and science and an understanding of science? How? But yeah, I don't like getting into such things because I am here for the science. I want to get to the meaning, the devil in the detail. And if you engage or entertain these arguments, we will never get to it. We all end up running around creating all this dialogue, but none of it is actually getting us any closer to understanding the natural world better. But anyway, let me get into imbuzi. Let's talk about imbuzi, Azazela, the atoning sacrifice. Now it is said the story of creation begins at midnight, the 21st of June. Let me stop right there. Now I understand a lot of us in religious schools who are still like this, even amadlozis and spiritualists, bala. They're like, no, the day begins at sunrise, and you are not getting it. The day begins at midnight because that is when the sun comes out of that low point. That low point, that degree of the 21st and the 22nd of June. Remember, the cycle of the year also happens during the 24-hour period. That is why we have a 24-hour or Horus. That's an anagram, hour and the word Horus. That's an anagram. That is why we have a 24-hour period or our day. Now it is said that creation, and you're going to see why this also unfolds so nicely into science and physics, unlike this thing of saying the day begins at sunrise. I'm going to get into it. So now, it is said that creation begins at midnight. For us in the southern hemisphere, that is the 21st of June, when umalangeni, umlenze munye, reaches his lowest point. It is said now in this position, nature is said to be in a state of coma in the southern hemisphere. It's winter, Gyabanda. The heat's intensity and heat of the sun is at its lowest point. But this now slowly begins to change from the 25th of June. Our sun and savior begins to move now from this point. Now, because we are following allegories of the north, we are following a system that was created based on the north. I'm going to use the north as the example or the reference point. Now, if we were in the north on the 25th of December, you just have to flip hours over to see how it works in the southern hemisphere. If we were in the north, we would be able to see the solar deities, the solar deities such as Mithra, Horus, Jesu, Mlenze, why all these solar deities are born at midnight as the celestial virgin Virgo or Isis, Usisi, or Mary is rising in the east quadrant of the sky. All solar deities are born this way, and they are also born of a virgin. Then now in the story, there comes the time to flight or escape. In this case, they are escaping Kronos or Saturn, who rules Capricorn, who wants to kill Abantwana, like we see in the Christian allegory, who Herod, as soon as the child is born, he's after the child. That is said now trying to kill the newborn Horus, or Set Isita, or Saturn, trying to kill the newborn child, so that the powers of darkness may hold on so that the powers of darkness may still linger on, and winter carries on further to a time when it's not supposed to. In the book now, Kababumutwa, Indaba, My Children, we see this play out now in the creation account, where we have Kelesi, the mother of Uzahareli, instructed by their kaula birds, the wise kaula birds. They say, listen, you better kill that child. And she flees to find refuge in the wilderness in a cave. Remember, the sun is always said to be coming out of a cave. Another version of this now, the version of the fleeing mother we find in the book of Revelation. The woman who is clothed in the sun, who's standing on the moon, yada yada yada, who is running away from a dragon. She is given 2 wings of the great eagle, the kaula birds, that she may fly into the wilderness again. And when this happens, there is a period of silence in God's history while the sun is transiting through the signs of Capricorn and Aquarius. This now equates to the time. Remember, in the story of Jesus, there in the north, we are told he flees down south. This is that time period now, from the time the sun is reborn on the 25th to the time when in August, around August, where Besuthu, for example, they start their year. From this time until that time, there is a silence, because yes, he is risen, but he's not yet strong enough to oppose the deceiver. Now, the word Capricorn comes from Capricornus, the Latin Capricornus, which means a goat's horn, denoting a male goat. Now, the constellation has the head of a goat and the tail of a fish, commonly associated with 2 goat types: the mountain goats, like we see in the mountains of Kenya, and the sea goat. In the astrological image now, the sea goat is climbing or ascending the waves. It's coming out of the waters. Which waters? The primordial waters. We'll get into that. This is a symbol now of the winter solstice, where the sun reaches its lowest point in the ecliptic, then begins its yearly climb from the 25th of June. The imagery again of the goat climbing a mountain has come to represent Umlenze Munye, slowly making his way or his climb out of the winter solstice, seeking higher ground. The Christians mazicula sipathi ngiqonda indlela enyukayo, ngikhwela zonke izinsuku, nginguye khulekayo, Nkosi ngimise phezulu. The goat now is the asterism of that yearly climb. Guys, religion, Christianity, Islam, whatever system you're using comes from astrotheology. It is astrotheology that has been watered down to the Christian theology that has got us in a stupor, because we are reading these things literally. It's solar theology, which comes from astrology. The song says, I am pressing on the upward way. New heights I'm climbing every day. The 25th of June, the sun gains new heights, like the song is saying. It takes its first step, left foot forward march from the heart, the first degree of the upward journey. Then 8 days after this, on the 2nd of June, which was yesterday, we start seeing a time change in sunrise and sunset, when on the 8th day it becomes clearly visible that ngempela umalangeni Lazarus, Osiris, has been resurrected. The first week of July also marks the start of the civil year. If you look out tomorrow morning, you will see the star cluster Isilimela, the Pleiades. The star cluster whose appearing tells us the work year is beginning. Get your hoes ready. Get ready to work the land. Get ready to till the land. Interestingly, now, ngesintu, we do imsebenzi, rituals, and rites of passage in the course of autumn and winter. 8 days after the sun starts its decline into winter, on May Day we have placed Ancestor Day. Listen now. As the Redeemer of mankind sinks to his grave, we slaughter goats. As the constellation of the goat Capricorn makes its way across our evening sky, we are slaughtering goats. We slaughter goats. In astrology, Capricorn is ruled by the planet Saturn, Isita. The planet is considered the most evil and wicked influence of all the planets. The planet Nomakama is called the Great in Fortune, and all that part of the zodiac, the signs of Capricorn and Aquarius, are both ruled by this great misfortune, the Lord of the Rings, Saturn, Isita, also known as Chronos or time, which destroys all things. There is no outrunning Father Time. The same way there is no outrunning the immortal Ulumukanda, the lost cannibal in Baba's book, who cooks and devours his victims. Again, in the Christian allegorical language of mythology, Kronos devours his own children. In the Christian mythology now, the devourer of children is Herod. In the Old Testament, Capricorn is aligned to the tribe Naphtali, who is said to be a hind deer let loose. Okay, let's get even further into it now. Now we're going to get into the gist of this. We're going to shift it now to the physics of this. Because remember, that is the point. These stories must be able to align with the natural order and the physics and the workings that we see in modernity, the workings that we see standing from outside, trying to pry in, but we cannot see it because we do not fully understand the ecliptic. And if we can't understand the ecliptic, it means we cannot understand the alphabet and how it actually comes together to express physical phenomena, the phenomena behind that we see around us, the physics. So yes, now when the sun travels its first degree out of the winter solstice, we say it's the let there be light moment that we find the Bible. The vibrational frequency is the sound, the Om, which permeates all existence. And with this utterance, the indivisible whole strains into divisibility. And why does this happen? Why does this take place? Why does this strain from indivisibility to divisibility happen? Well, the adepts actually say this is the most futile question to try and investigate because we just don't know the answer. All we can do is observe nature, then draw conclusions. Like this one. A seed represents indivisibility. All the potential, intelligence, wisdom, and creativity needed to perpetually sustain divisibility is in the indivisible seed. A seed can go through perpetual cycles of life and death. Now we can stretch this further back and apply it to our minds. The seed can be likened to the indivisible mind. In the mind lies all the intelligence needed to sustain divisibility. The same way the seed has all the knowledge on how to birth a tree, which will one day resurrect the seed in the fruit and thus becoming a tree again. This is why Jesus says, this is why Jesus talks about eternal life. There is no death. In the Christian doctrine, man only spends 1,000 years in heaven, then he comes back to earth for repetition of his cycle in the flesh. There's a verse where Jesus says, the flesh will not know death. Jesus says this because there is no death. There is only cycles. Now we can stretch this even further back and say that which we call omnipresence, the mind, the seed, has all the desire to birth and sustain the endless cycles of divisibility, ukuhlukana, which are sustained by a limitless sea of indivisibility, which has no observable locus. Unobservable omnipresence, desire for divisibility or experience, sustains the divisible kaleidoscope of motion, that which we call creation. It is ukubhebhana, as we say in Zulu, ukubhebha, sex, friction, ukudlana, that begets form, charging in electrical terms, compression, if we use the terms of thermodynamics, the drum beat, if we use music, the hand ibhebha the still stretched animal skin, the fingers abhebha the still taut strings on a harp or a guitar. Now, if you had to ask the musician why he does this, why he fingerfucks the chords of a musical instrument so beautifully, he would simply say, because it feels good. It feels right. The same way the adepts say there is prying into why it is futile, because it happens because it feels good. It feels right. The all-consuming, indivisible desire to express divisibility, motion, beauty, rhythm, synchronicity bursts forth. Why? Because it feels good. To the musician, there is nothing as exhilarating as improv music. Nothing compares to it. To go back to Baba Mutwa's creation account, it is this compression or desire which enacts the friction to beget the living spark. And Baba says the strange mating between the nothingness and the river time is what creates perpetually, through endless cycles of repetition, the living spark, the let there be light moment, which generates or discharges electricity, idlozi, awareness, mind thinking, divisibility. Now, everything that I've just said is captured in the symbol of the yang or the yang, the sound om or ong. Now understand there's a lot of grown men with grey beards, izingwevu, parroting information that we got from hoteps through comparison, not understanding the cause, but through comparison. Now, there's a lot of us who actually believe now the yang to be the representation of a phallus, a womb, the vagina of the woman, and somehow the Christian cross is a symbol of two phalluses. This is nonsense, guys. Please hear me well. These both are called crosses. They are both crosses. Just because this one is this way and the other one has an orb at the top does not mean it represents something different. Remember what I said. Spirituality, religion, and science is one thing, which means the cross cannot represent two fallacies. That is a misrepresentation. That is misunderstanding. Now, even though technically we are not yet in spring, the sunrise of the year, the symbol of the sun rising above the horizon is what is actually expressed in the ankh, or two sticks and a circle, the orb, written like this, or as it sounds, I, or Iowa, Jesus, Owane, Wowane. This is where such names actually are derived from. The symbol of the IOA, of which when the ankh now, it becomes the circle, the orb, one stick placed horizontally, and then we will have the other stick. It is from these three symbols, or the trinity of symbols, that gives us the ankh. This is where we get such names as Yahweh, Iona, John. The most primitive meaning of this symbol now is that the bottom ray of light, or the beard of the sun, dancing upon the medieval waters of Nu, symbolizes the finger of the Hierophant, the priest, pointing at the rising sun above the horizon. Now, the horizon, or the water in this case, is the still indivisible nothing, Itongo, omnipresence, the fulcrum of all potential, which mates with the river time, symbolized as the beard or the finger or the phallus, the river time which impregnates the still waters of no thing, or the still waters of Ntu, creating the living spark, symbolized by the sun slowly rising above the horizon, engulfing the nothingness, engulfing the darkness. And when does this happen yearly? When does this take place in nature? It's happening right now as the sun is rising from the tomb of winter. Like I said, everything that we know about the world around us must be able to syncretize into a whole. So the zero in nature, or those still waters, or that still stretched drum before it is from here that we begin. If we use the 4-engine piston stroke, this is where now we are at bottom, dead center of the compression stroke, getting ready. The piston is getting ready to get up to top dead stroke, where the little spark at the height of the compression, the little spark, the ignition gives the spark, which gives the discharge that propels us forward. I'm going to bring it to you today. I told you the fez is out and it's facing east. It's facing to the right hand of the Father. I'm going to bring it to you. The winter solstice symbolizes the still primordial waters of Ntu. Every year the sun is reborn from this point and comes back to die at this point. The winter solstice also represents Itongo, like I just said, our beginning, the place we return to. For 2.5 days, the sun neither drops any further down or climbs up. There, at that point of stillness, that is where we put the fulcrum of all potentiality. In religion, Bati, be still and know that I am God, because it is within that stillness. It is within that stillness that one experiences that affirmation that thou art God, thou art one with God. And it is in that stillness that is where lies the potential for all power, the potential for all energy, the potential for all matter. In that still fulcrum, which is neither here nor nowhere at the same time. It's not an observable locus in matter. Now, the lesson we get from the sun again at sunrise is when the sun first makes its first appearance at sunrise, the first form we see is a spheroid. We're gonna get into now the science of how nature creates. The science of how nature creates spheres. Flat earthers, please listen carefully. And so, another lesson, like I've said, that we get from the sun when it makes its first appearance at sunrise, the first form we see is a spheroid, the shape of a heart, a woman's nipple, and eventually the sun breaks free from the horizon, then we get to see the full sphere. We get to see the full sphere. Mother Nature is in the business of forming spheres of matter surrounded by cube wave fields of formless space. These cube wave fields now, this formless cube wave field, a happening that is something that is here, even though we may not perceive it. The idea now of the cube of Saturn, the cube that, or the meteorites that the Muslims, they circle every year. It is pointing to the higher teachings of this knowledge, or the higher realization or understanding that spheres of matter are surrounded by wave fields or cube wave fields of formless space. The idea of this thing they call the Makeba, or it comes from this idea of the cube. And when you break it down, there is so much depth and beauty and knowledge to it. But we cannot get to, because we're all going around, oh, the cube is Saturn, Saturn is the cube, Saturn represents the cube, it's the cube, hey, the matrix is a cube. Oh man, it's tiring. We need to get into the physics of this now. We need to get into the physics of this, but we cannot get into the physics if we don't understand the metaphysics that is forming the physics, or what they call it today, the subquanta phenomena that is forming the quanta that we are seeing, the quanta of phenomenal space. Yeah, let me put it like that. Spheres now are created by extending discs, the same way you see a chef extending flat pizza dough, by spinning it. In the creation account now, this action equates to the spirit or the heat expansion. I've gotten here and I have not gotten into the creation account as taught by Indaba, my children, and so I am talking about now the spirit of heat, or the little spark now living as the spirit of heat expansion. But before I get there, let me just go back a bit and get in here. You see how worn out it is? So in the creation account, Babu Mutwa tells us that within this sea, or with the primordial waters of no thing, an action emerges, a desire emerges, and the river time ends up desiring or craving the primordial waters of the no thing. And now, out of this mating, a living spark is created. Now, when this living spark is created, in the accounts of Kemet, if you read how Asar comes to be, this living spark, or this let there be light moment, that is where we are. When the spark comes out and he says, I self-created myself, because within the imperceptible waters of Nu, we don't know what is happening. He self-creates, because the division that happens within the divisibility, no one can tell you about. All you know that though is that if you friction that indivisible space, if you friction it in a certain way, if you condition it in a certain way, the living spark discharges out of it. And now this living spark, it looks around and it says, I self-created. I came out from the Big Ben, or I alone did it. And now, in this version of the account, the little spark realizes that either I grow or I die. And then it begins to, here it is again, to eat or devour the no thing, until eventually it devoured everything and it became this omniscient presence now that says, I am. And I am. And every time it does this, there is a disturbance, a formation of matter. And how is this matter forming? It's coming to be in spheres. Then Ubaba goes on to say that when the river time realizes that what the living spark had done, to punish it, it sends the spirit of cold. This is now the primordial waters. They've come now in a different form. They are now the spirit of cold. And Ubaba tells us that the war between the spirit of cold, compression, and the spirit of heat, the living spark, expansion, it is from these ashes now that everything, the stars, everything, all the orbs that we are witnessing around us, it is from the ashes of that fight. That is where it comes from. So that is now, when I say now here that in the creation account, this equates to the spirit of heat, expansion. That is what I'm actually talking about. Dr. Walter Russell says this action is centrifugal, or centrifugal, sorry. Yes, centrifugal, that's how you're supposed to say it. The living spark, or the spirit of heat, is at war, like I just said, with the spirit of cold, compression. This action now is centripetal, coming from without, centripetally coming in. And as I've highlighted, the other action, the heat expansion, is centrifugal or centrifugal. Two opposing forces warring so that the electrical discharge, or idlozi, conditions or compresses matter into being. Now, if I were to use water as an example, singabantu abamnyama right now, we are still excited by the idea of siyohlambulula by the waterfall, siyogeza by the waters, but we are not understanding the teaching that is in water. We need abantwana bethongo manje who are not just excited about the cleansing in the water, but also excited about the lessons that one can come, or the lessons that can come to a person while meditating by the waters. When a projectile causes disturbance in water, the first shape we see is a ring. And then from out of that ring, while bigger rings are forming, a sphere emerges. Not a flat disk. Not a flat disk. We can then liken the disturbance with the spirit of cold, which centripetally compresses inert gases into rings. Then the rings become spheroids, ibele. The heart then gradually becomes a sphere, not a flat disk. Spheres and spheroids are everywhere around us in nature. That is what nature is creating perpetually, self-repeating themselves. One thing nature does not seem to have in form is flat disks self-repeating themselves. Man has come up with many instruments for measuring and defining this disturbance or the action of the living spark within divisibility. An example of this now, when the living spark is measured by electricians, for example, it's defined as current flow between two poles, the charge and discharge between the positive and the negative terminal. This is one way of defining what the living spark does under certain pre-prescribed conditions. This, of course, again, we learned from nature. The sun's ecliptic, orbital studies, orbital dynamics, I think it's called. Every year, our sun charges or compresses one half of the earth while the other half discharges or radiates. The book of Matthew says, the last shall be first and the first shall be last. Roles in the drama are switched, or poles in the drama are switched. The good God becomes the bad God, the devil, and the devil becomes the good God. The half of the earth which is charged by spring and summer becomes discharged by autumn and winter, while the other half which was discharging in autumn and winter is now charging in spring and summer. Currently, the northern hemisphere is in the peak of summer, the charge, which becomes the discharge cycle after the autumn harvest. While we in the southern hemisphere have just gone past the first degree in the charge cycle. We can actually say, unomkhubulwane, the earth is a battery which charges us through her in-breath, which we call spring and summer, and then discharge with her in her out-breath, that which we call autumn and winter. This lesson again is found in the 24-hour cycle. At the appearing of the sun, we charge our bodies. Everything in nature wakes up. Everything. And when the sun sets, we sleep to discharge. We sleep to discharge. Now going back to my point in drama. Now even though at this point in the drama we are not yet at sunrise, but the esoteric and symbol of the time is captured in the Om or the Yong sound. Now these are just some of the many lessons we can actually get from nature. Specifically, the orbs. That is why the Bible says, seek ye first the kingdom of God, or seek ye first the starry kingdom of God, and everything else shall be added unto thee. Everything else shall be added unto thee. To go back to the Ankh again, we can say that the waters of Nu, or that horizontal stick, actually represents the two equinoxes, or the line of equinox. Equal night and day, when there is balance before the disturbance. We can align it to that, and then the orb, or the circle that we see, of which, if you put a straight line there in that orb, if you put a straight line like this, a straight line of the cross, it places you at the summer solstice. And then the bottom line, which we identified as also represented as the beard of the sun, or this is why, by the way, have you seen the beards of the pharaoh? They are always like this. Every time a pharaoh is represented, whether it's a male or a female, they give her the beard. They give her the beard. Now, back to the young. Now, even though at this point in the drama, we are not yet at sunrise, the esoteric meaning and symbol is Om, or the sound Ang. This point now at the winter solstice represents, like I said, the fulcrum of potential. The fulcrum of unsexed potential, undefined, without locus, indivisible, the one still balanced whole. It is now from that whole where desire comes forth, inkanuko, a desire for experience in motion. An experience in motion. And of course, where is motion? Motion is in the plane of spheres, the plane of divisibility, the divided river time, and the no thing straining and stressing, pulling against each other, seeking to become the other in an effort to void each other, seeking a condition of balance, since they cannot go back to that state of stillness. So the only other thing to do is to what? Is to seek a condition in balance. And how is this condition sought? A seek condition in balance is form. Form, how can I put it? Form simulates balance. Form simulates balance. No matter how, for example, if I'll use the example of the wheel or a gyro, if you spin a gyro fast enough, even where the spokes are, or where the spokes of the wheel are supposed to be, when they spin fast enough, they give the illusion of form, until when they lose that speed again, you can actually see that, oh, actually, the center, or the space around the gyro, actually is not solid. But if you spin it up, it appears solid. And so now, these two poles now, they strain and stress, seeking to void each other. How does this straining and stressing happen? The radiating principle, once it is reached, or once it is expended, the entire force for motion, it flips roles and becomes the centripetal compression, or the other half, trying to find a what? Or trying to return to that point of balance. That point of balance, of which it cannot find in the world of motion, in the world of matter, because matter is an illusion. I wish I could break this even further down for now, but We're not there yet. We're not there. Eventually, these lessons will we just be talking science. No verses, no. We'll just be unpacking the science yesintu so that we can understand how these ideas are contextualized in our languages. So I believe that's all I had time for today. So that is what Abalandeli Belanga is all about. We are all about studying the positions of these orbs so that we can understand the type of effects that they give in the natural world. If we don't take it there, then we're just going to be stuck as a civilization of race that speaks of greatness but cannot replicate that greatness because we do not understand the world we are living in. We are still at odds. We are screaming at each other. Like I said, the spiritualist, the losist, to the religionist, and we don't even have time to apply our minds to the ideas that were used by our ancestors. How do we have, for example, while we are still having these arguments, we are yet to get to a place where we can take, for example, ivutha, this thing they call ivutha, and maybe start applying the principles of thermodynamics to it and actually see if we cannot change the application from into yokumosha to something that we can use, something that can benefit everyone. This is where I am trying to go to. Eventually, these lectures will be done with like-minded people who understand the science, so that we may also build a physics that we come to, or a study of physical phenomena that we come to at our own terms, able to answer questions about our environment and how to navigate that environment. It doesn't make sense that right now sixakwe Eskom, but sinabantu abahlala hey thina sikwazi ukuthumela izulu. We cannot be there. Open your mind.